it's Nicole. We're having a break from the Iliad today. I want to show you some secondhand books that came my way. A friend is in the process of moving house and a massive clear out. She took photos of her bookshelves and let me pick whatever I wanted. What a lucky girl I am. It was better than the sweet shop, definitely. So all the books in today's video are secondhand books, and these are not even everything I got from her. I'm going to show you 5 titles from the 20th century, 3 out of the 5 authors I've never read before. They are L.P. Hartley, Greene and Evelyn Waugh, and 2 authors I have read, Jerome and D.H. Lawrence. Among the 5 titles, the one I'm most excited about is The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley. I've never heard of The Go-Between or L.P. Hartley until I read Mad About Shakespeare by Jonathan Bate last year. If you're new here, I awarded this book my favorite non-fiction, favorite teacher, favorite audiobook, and the book of the year from 2022. I've been very curious about the novel The Go-Between, which played a crucial role in Jonathan Bate's life. He said, "I loved the book so much that until recently I dared not return to it for fear of disappointment, and I am thankful that by being forced to study it at the age of 15, I was relaunched into a life of reading." That's like a trusted and respected teacher saying this is one of his favorite books and I want to go read it immediately. Jonathan Bate wrote about his encounter with the novel at O-level when he was a teenager. I will read one paragraph out in full because I love Jonathan Bate's writing. I cannot do it justice by summarizing it. I won't hide my motivation either. I want you to hear a paragraph, fall in love with it, and possibly read the whole book yourself. In the 6th form, there was no choice but to read all the way through to the end of The Go-Between. It was O-level year, and this was one of the set texts. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. That's the first sentence of the novel. That I liked. The past, which was opened up, seemed both familiar and strange. Many elements of the book transcended time. A boy who is bullied, but who outwits his rivals through clever use of language. Shyness and embarrassment, long, slow summer days, the outsider peering into a world of beauty and elegance that may not be as happy or desirable a place as he imagines. The trauma of the climax, a suicide, a child's nervous breakdown, a mother dispatched to a mental institution. The onset of teenage years bring a reckoning with the body, with sex and sexuality. The confusion of young Leo Colston as he falls in love with both the lovers he goes between. Ethereal, blonde, upper-class Marian, the Virgo who proves not to be. And Farmer Ted, ripped and tanned, was presumably a projection of L.P. Hartley's experience of being stifled in the closet. Other elements, meanwhile, the manners, dialogue, dress, and customs of the characters, transported me to a lost time, the Edwardian summer of my grandparents. Back to the novel itself. L.P. Hartley was a British novelist and short story writer. He was born at the end of the 19th century and died in the 1970s. The Go-Between was published after the Second World War. The story is set at the end of the Victorian era, and it looks at the society through the eyes of a naive schoolboy outsider. The blurb on the back cover says, "In his delicate and perceptive study of early adolescence, L.P. Hartley evokes a young boy's traumatic initiation into the adult world of passion, deception, and hypocrisy." A man in his 60s looks back at his boyhood for the first time in 50 years, recalling events that took place on his summer visit to a Norfolk country house at the turn of the century. Cautiously, he unearths painful memories that have been buried for all these years, but they were there, I knew, the more complete, the more unforgettable, for being carefully embalmed. It is the story of the loss of innocence, a loss so shattering and profound that it breeds a lasting mistrust of life. It sounds deliciously exciting. I need to push it all the way up to my reading queue. I'll carry on with authors that I've never tried before. Evelyn Waugh was a 20th century English writer. Brideshead Revisited is probably one of his most famous works. I never knew this, but the full title of the novel is Brideshead Revisited: The Sacred and Profane Memories of Captain Charles Ryder. The title itself is already very intriguing. It was first published in 1945. It follows from the 1920s to the early 40s the life and romances of the protagonist Charles Ryder, and especially his friendship with a wealthy English family who live in a mansion called Brideshead Castle. I heard about the novel in one of the great courses called The Art of Reading. Apparently, it's a book that continues to provoke widely varied readings. For some, it is a brilliant and affecting work of art, but for other readers, the book is vulgar and even schlocky. I had to search what schlocky means. It means apparently of inferior quality, cheap, tacky, of tasteless appearance. This novel is loved because of its aristocratic settings and characters, its nostalgic, even elegiac tone. Elegy is a poem of serious reflection, typically a lament for the dead, and its subtle treatment of Charles's conversion experience. This novel is hated because for some readers it is an expression of snobbery. The nostalgia for youth is hopelessly sentimental, and Charles's conversion is unconvincing. It sounds like the perfect kind of book to get my brain excited about subtext, filling in the gaps, and the interpretation of unsaid things. And guys, I have to confess, I just did the most unwise thing. I searched Brideshead Revisited and discovered the trailer of a magnificent film adaptation with the most glorious cast from 2008. And what did I do? I watched it. Now the plot is spoiled because I couldn't control my fingers, but fortunately the ending is still safe. If you know, please be kind and do not leave a comment. I have to read it as soon as possible so I can watch all those beautiful people tearing each other apart. I can also read the novel with those actors' faces in mind. Really can't wait. And this is not all. There's a rumor, which I just heard, of a new 10-part miniseries of Brideshead Revisited, featuring Andrew Garfield, Kate Blanchett, and Ralph Fiennes. May they find the money and not waste it. I'll talk about the rest of the books a lot more briefly, so we're not here all day. According to Wikipedia, Greene was an English writer and journalist, regarded by many as one of the leading English novelists of the 20th century. He lived through most of the 20th century. Imagine being born 4 years after Queen Victoria died, and living through the First World War as a teenager, and the Second World War in your 40s, and growing old listening to the Beatles and watching James Bond and the early Star Wars films. Evelyn Waugh was born just 1 year before Greene, but he died a lot earlier, so he didn't get to watch Star Wars. But he would have watched James Bond too. Travels with My Aunt is a novel about the travel of Henry Pulling, a retired bank manager, and his eccentric Aunt Augusta as they find their way across Europe. Through Aunt Augusta, a veteran of Europe's hotel bedrooms, Henry joins a shiftless twilight society, mixing with hippies, war criminals, CIA men, smoking pot, breaking all the currency regulations, coming alive after a dull suburban lifetime. It sounds like the type of book that makes you re-evaluate your boring everyday life and makes you want to go and do something adventurous today. The next one is The Princess and Other Stories by D.H. Lawrence. I've so far read his novel The Rainbow and a short story called The Prussian Officer. This is a collection of 12 short stories, 6 published in the 1920s. Lawrence died in March 1930, so everything else was published after he died. 4 in the 1930s, 1 in the 50s, and 1 called The Willful Woman, published here for the first time in 1971. By the sound of the blurb, the collection might be a bit different to the usual Lawrence. By usual, I mean a lot of sex, explicitly or implicitly. So, 12 stories, all from the last 8 years of Lawrence's life, when his vision sought expression more and more in the form of fables. A woman rides off into the mountains with a Mexican guide and returns alone and crazed. A woman has a love affair with the sun. A man learns the secret of life from a school of porpoises. I think they are a bit like dolphins. A boy sleeps for 1,000 years and wakes in utopia. An undying man is created in a jar. The collection includes the first reprint since 1928, the unexpurgated version of Sun, I don't know what that word means, and 1 previously unpublished story, The Willful Woman. I do like the fable quality of the one-line summaries. My only worry is this book is going to fall apart before I finish it. Every time I open it, the spine cracks. Shall we try? If you watched my December and January wrap-up video, you might remember I loved reading Three Men in a Boat over the Christmas holiday, so I was delighted to find this on her shelf. Three Men in a Boat, to say nothing of the dog, was a hilarious Victorian book by English writer Jerome about a 2-week boating holiday on the Thames. It was so successful and popular, Jerome published a sequel 11 years later in 1900 about a cycling tour in Germany called Three Men on the Bummel. I think that's how you say it, where the same 3 companions cycled through the Black Forest. It says something about the Victorian era bicycle craze, just like the first book reflects the popularity of the boating holiday at the time. Just like I did some camping trips and could well relate to the stories in the first book, I also do a lot of cycling, so I look forward to their shenanigans. Goodreads labels both books as fiction, but I'm not sure at least Three Men in a Boat is purely fictional. I think they did go for boat trips, although apparently the dog was fictional, unfortunately. I don't know if they also actually went to Germany, but it doesn't matter. I expect some refreshing and witty silliness. Let me know if you've read any of the authors and which title you'd like me to read first. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.